She came smiling, with flowers in one hand and a speech in the other. She said she wanted to help African women. She took photos with babies, walked through villages, praised Traoré on camera. But behind the kindness was a secret job. And when the truth came out, she didn't just lose her fake charity. She cried as the whole world watched her get exposed. Her name was Claire Dubois, a young blonde woman in her early 30s, French accent, expensive sunglasses, calm voice. She arrived in Ouagadougou as the director of a Western NGO called Hope Forward, claiming to support girls' education and women's health. She gave interviews on state TV, praising President Ibrahim Traoré for giving African youth the courage to dream. She visited schools, took selfies with market women, donated boxes of books and solar lamps. "It's not about politics," she said. "It's about people." But she wasn't here for just people. She wasn't even based in Burkina Faso. Her real base was in Abidjan, Côte d'Ivoire, and her real job was much darker. While she toured rural villages by day, her nights were filled with encrypted phone calls and quiet messages to unknown contacts. She always traveled with a media officer, a tall man who never gave his name. She carried 2 phones, one public, one for security. She often asked odd questions. How far is the nearest military base? How often do soldiers change shifts in these areas? Has Burkina Faso received any drones recently? At first, no one questioned her. She was polite, clean, fluent in French. She gave out free things. But something felt strange. One woman in a small village whispered to a local leader, "She's not here to help us. She's here to find something." Meanwhile, Burkinabe intelligence had already flagged her. They knew her NGO's name was tied to a strategic monitoring program funded by an American foundation. They knew her emails were being routed through a French IP address, with code names like Phase Orange and T-Access Zone. Still, President Traoré said, "Let her work. The more she believes she's winning, the clearer her mission will become." So she kept smiling. She kept giving speeches. And she had no idea that her biggest donation was about to be her own downfall. By her 3rd week in Burkina Faso, Claire Dubois was everywhere. She'd shaken hands with ministers. She'd been on state radio. And she even took a photo with schoolgirls, holding up a sign that said, "Africa first, women always." But behind the smiles, her real work had begun. She had visited 9 villages in 7 days, each near military training grounds, oil depots, or drone watchtowers. She said she was inspecting field progress. But what she was really doing was making a map. One night, in her hotel room in Ouagadougou, she opened her laptop and began marking red circles across the country. She named the file BF-Field Access-V2. The circles weren't schools. They were military routes, border patrol bases, and drone delivery lines. That same night, she attached the map to an encrypted email, addressed to a contact saved under the name Melvin. The server wasn't in France. It wasn't in the US. It was traced to a NATO-linked office in Abidjan, Côte d'Ivoire. She hit send. She smiled. She thought no one had seen. But what she didn't know was that her laptop had already been mirrored. Everything she typed was being read in real time by Burkinabe intelligence. The moment she hit send, President Ibrahim Traoré received a copy of the email on his encrypted line. He looked at the map. He studied the code names. Then he picked up the phone and said, "Let her keep going." She just confirmed everything we suspected. The next morning, Claire held a press breakfast with foreign journalists. She wore white. She called Burkina Faso a rising hope in the region. But when a local reporter asked her why her NGO was only working in military-heavy zones, she laughed nervously and said, "Pure coincidence. We just go where help is needed." The real coincidence? The exact same day. The presidential security team uncovered a USB drive hidden in a fake lipstick tube in her bag. Inside the drive, satellite images, drone flight patterns, government convoy photos. The time for pretending was almost over. But President Traoré didn't want her arrested in silence. He wanted the world to see it. So he sent her a polite invitation. You are invited to speak at the National Conference on African Sovereignty as a guest of honor. She accepted, excited, confident, and completely unaware that she was walking into her own public exposure. The event was grand. Flags waved, cameras flashed, and the red carpet stretched across the steps of the National Assembly Hall. Inside, hundreds of people gathered: ministers, students, foreign diplomats, and journalists. At the center of it all sat Claire Dubois. She wore a bright African dress. She smiled at everyone. She waved like a celebrity. A banner above the stage read, "African sovereignty, our voice, our future." Claire had been asked to speak on the final panel, a closing session called How Foreign Partnerships Empower Africa. She prepared her speech carefully. Partnership, she wrote, is built on love, truth, and trust. But as she rehearsed backstage, she had no idea that the president she had praised so many times was about to turn her praise into her downfall. President Ibrahim Traoré arrived without fanfare. No speech, no announcement. He simply walked in during the middle of a panel, sat quietly, and watched her from the third row. She noticed him. She smiled again. And then, when her name was called, she stepped onto the stage with full confidence. Burkina Faso is a shining light, she began. I have walked its villages, spoken to its women, seen its hope. The audience clapped politely. She continued. We, the global community, are not here to control. We are here to serve. We are your friends. And then, President Traoré stood up. The crowd turned. The moderator stepped aside. Traoré walked slowly to the front of the hall. Madame Claire, he said gently, you speak of trust. Would you trust us enough to answer a few questions? Live? Claire froze. Of course, she replied, trying to laugh it off, but the room was silent now. The clapping had stopped. The cameras had zoomed in, and on the screen behind her, a file appeared, labeled BF-Field Access-V2.pdf. She turned. Her eyes widened. It was her map. And this conference was no longer a celebration. It was the beginning of a reckoning. The screen behind Claire glowed with red circles, marked locations, and coded names. She blinked. She swallowed hard. The smile disappeared. The file on display wasn't some random image. It was the exact classified military access map she had sent 2 nights earlier, from her hotel room, to an encrypted server in Abidjan, Côte d'Ivoire. President Ibrahim Traoré stood calmly in front of her. Claire, he said softly, do you recognize this? She hesitated. I'm not sure where this came from. He didn't interrupt. Instead, another document appeared behind her, an email. The sender, claire.dubois@hopeforward.org. The subject, Phase Orange, Tracking COM Vehicles, Civilian-Friendly Zones. The body, BF West routes exposed, minimal resistance from volunteers. Use school visits for visual confirmation. Mission continues. Her own words. Gasps filled the room. Even the foreign diplomats leaned forward in disbelief. A local journalist stood up from the back row and shouted, she was spying on the army, using women and children to hide her mission. Claire's hands began to shake. This isn't what it looks like, she said quickly. I was only sending data for fundraising. Fundraising? Traoré asked quietly. He turned to the audience. We cloned her devices. Every file, every message. We traced her instructions from Abidjan to a NATO-linked office titled Cultural Research Desk. She said she came to help our women, But she came to weaken our defense. And worse, she did it while holding our children's hands. Claire started crying. Tears ran down her cheeks as the truth hit her. Not just the evidence, but the eyes of hundreds of people watching her crumble on stage. One woman in the audience stood up and shouted, "You used us! You lied to us!" Another whispered, "She took photos of my child." I trusted her. Claire dropped the mic. She looked to Traoré. "Please, can we talk in private? Not like this." But he didn't answer. He simply stepped aside as two plainclothes officers walked onto the stage. They didn't touch her. They didn't force her. They just stood beside her, waiting. The cameras zoomed in. Traoré looked to the crowd and said, "They send soft faces now. They send kind eyes, clean hands, and clever names. But beneath them are the same old plans." Claire was escorted down the stairs as the audience remained in stunned silence. One girl near the front cried, not because she supported Claire, but because she had believed her. "She said she was one of us," the girl whispered, but she wasn't. And now, the world knew it. By sunrise, the entire continent had seen the clip. Claire Dubois, once hailed as a humanitarian, was now a spy caught on stage. Her own words, her own files, her own downfall. The video spread faster than wildfire. Twitter, WhatsApp, TikTok, Al Jazeera, BBC. Every outlet ran the headline. Traoré exposes foreign operative, masquerading as charity CEO. Some tried to defend her. A French newspaper called it a misunderstanding. A US-based NGO said she was gathering data for research purposes. But no one could explain the emails. No one could explain the map. No one could explain the fake lipstick USB filled with satellite footage of Burkinabe military sites. That afternoon, a secure line rang inside the presidential compound. President Ibrahim Traoré answered it himself. On the other end, Alassane Ouattara, president of Côte d'Ivoire. "Excellency," Ouattara said, "I ask that we treat this matter with diplomacy. This woman holds cross-border ties. Let us handle it quietly." Traoré didn't raise his voice. He didn't even pause. "She sent sensitive intelligence from your capital to parties operating in Paris and Washington. She stood in our villages with lies in her pocket. You can handle your guests however you want, but in Burkina Faso, we handle traitors one way, with justice." Silence on the line. Then a calm reply. "Then we may need to rethink cooperation." Traoré smiled and said, "If cooperation means swallowing betrayal, Burkina Faso will go hungry instead." He hung up. Within the hour, a second request came, this time from the French ambassador in Ouagadougou. A private meeting, a quiet resolution. Traoré declined. Instead, he walked to the National Press Center and gave one of the shortest speeches of his presidency. They ask us to forget. They ask us to forgive. But they never ask themselves what we feel when their operatives sit in our homes, shake our hands, and send our secrets across oceans. In the audience were villagers from the places Claire had visited. Mothers, teachers, even children who had been photographed. One woman stood up and said, "Mr. President, thank you for protecting our trust." That night, across Africa, people didn't just talk about the spy. They talked about the moment the mask was pulled off, not by force, but by calm truth. And Claire? She sat in a government facility just outside Ouagadougou. No cameras, no press, just a notebook, and the weight of the trap she thought she had set, now closed around her. 3 days after the arrest, Claire Dubois was still silent. No press statement, no apology. No embassy official could clean up what had already burned across the internet. Inside her holding room, she was no longer the smiling CEO who stood on stage. She was just a woman, staring at the walls, her mission collapsed under the weight of its own lies. But outside, Burkina Faso had already moved on. Not in forgetfulness, but in strength. In a packed hall at the University of Ouagadougou, students held an event titled They used to send soldiers. Now they send smiles. Paintings were displayed. Speeches were given. But the most powerful moment came when President Ibrahim Traoré walked in unannounced. He stood before the young audience and spoke plainly. They used to come with guns. Now they come with cameras. They used to hide behind uniforms. Now they hide behind causes. But whether they wear suits or scarves, whether they speak French or English, if they come to break us, they will leave exposed. The crowd stood up and applauded for almost a minute. But Traoré wasn't done. He pointed to the projector screen, where a single sentence appeared, bold, simple, unforgettable. The next one they send will be received the same way, calmly, watched, and unforgiven. That line spread across Africa within hours. Young people turned it into stickers. Poets turned it into verses. Activists painted it on walls, from Dakar to Dar es Salaam. Even some Western journalists began asking tougher questions back home. Why do we keep getting caught where we claim we're helping? Meanwhile, the story of Claire Dubois became a symbol, not just of espionage, but of a larger truth. Africa is no longer soft ground. And Burkina Faso, under Ibrahim Traoré, will no longer bow to diplomacy dressed as deception. As for Claire, she was eventually released, but banned for life from re-entering Burkina Faso or any allied Sahel nation. Her name is now remembered not for her charity, but for the moment she stood on stage, holding a microphone, and found herself caught, exposed, and crushed by truth.